Welcome back to Community Kind, a 100 Women podcast. I'm Karen Britton. Right now, across Australia, we are facing a housing crisis that is making headlines every single day. But for women and children escaping family and domestic violence, this isn't just a news story. It is a barrier to safety. We know that the inability to find a stable place to land is often the very thing that traps women in dangerous situations. Today, I'm joined by Jasmyn, the External Affairs and Communications Manager at Orana House. For over 35 years, Orana House has been a lifeline in Western Australia, providing not just refuge, but the long-term support women need to rebuild their lives. Jasmyn is here to talk to us about a very specific project that the 100 Women community got behind, the Housing Families Program. Through a $50,000 grant awarded in 2023, members funded a dedicated tenancy advocate, one person working 15 hours a week to walk beside women who the rental market had rejected over and over again. In this conversation, Jasmyn shares the reality of the 100 plus rental applications it often takes just to get a yes, and the incredible moment a family finally gets their own front door. A brief note before we start. This episode discusses family violence. We honour the voices of survivors and remember those tragically taken. We respect your journey and encourage you to listen with care for your own mental health and emotional health. Jasmyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Lovely to see you again.
Yes. We've been in each other's worlds for a few years now, and I find that my world is much better having you in it, knowing that the incredible work that you do at Orana House. And I guess I wanted to start by finding out from you, which I think a lot of our listeners would love to hear, is what it is like to work in a refuge.
I will say firstly, you definitely made a lot of people's worlds a lot better in the time since we've sat next to each other in a crowded room and first talked about this program. At the time when I met you a few years ago, I was reasonably new to the sector, and the first day that I went into the Orana House Refuge, I never forget this, but it was a huge wake-up call for me. Despite having grown up knowing and seeing a lot of instances of violence against women very close to me, I'd never been inside of a refuge. And the first day I was there, two of my colleagues, they were on the phone at the same time, taking two very different calls, two very critical situations, and we had only the one bed available. And it really is day in, day out like a triage in an emergency department. This is an emergency situation, and our team has to make these incredibly important, sometimes life or death judgment calls every single day. And we're a 24/7 crisis accommodation service at our core, but obviously we've needed to go beyond crisis accommodation and do so much more since, because it's not enough to keep putting Band-Aids on wounds or, plugging a dam with our pinky finger. There's a lot more that needs to be done in the bigger picture beyond crisis accommodation.
Thanks, Jasmyn. Okay, so let's go into the world of women that are facing such a crisis like this. When a woman leaves a violent relationship, most people assume the crisis is over. Can you explain why, for so many women, that is actually when the hardest part begins?
And just a brief mention of terminology, if you don't mind. I try personally to not say a violent relationship because it implies complicity, and a lot of these women are carrying so much shame as it is. So sometimes we use that to avoid labelling a person an abusive person. It's important to say, look, there has been someone who is choosing to use violence. This matters a lot in the way we talk to our clients and help them to realise that they don't need to carry this cloak of shame that they've been often wearing for years and years and years, with people kind of reinforcing that in some way they should have done something differently, when actually she's been in survival mode, often de-escalating, often using herself as a security blanket to shield her children. So what happens in that moment is immediately when someone comes into our service, we have to park any kind of judgment. I think that's probably what makes an amazing FDV sector worker, helping that woman to know that she will be listened to, she will be believed, and helping her to see her journey and her experience to this point as one of tremendous courage and strength, because that will carry her through some of the really tough points to come. And as you mentioned, there's this idea that when you leave, you're safe. And unfortunately, there's a lot of data that tells us exactly the opposite. The first 3 months after leaving are often the most dangerous. That's when most of the fatalities occur. And so this is what we call that crisis period. And that's where there's some very intensive support. We do a lot of work going through the magistrates' courts to help women to lodge family violence restraining orders, and obviously put a lot of safety planning and risk assessments in place. And that's obviously a very bespoke process. What's safety for one person might be very different for another.
Yes, which is amazing to be able to offer a tailored service like that. I'm interested to hear what services, your refuge does provide, just to give us a bit of a holistic idea of how a woman is supported.
Yeah, absolutely. A massive one is advocacy for every single woman, but also for every single child and young person. There's a dedicated advocate. It can be a very exhausting and frightening minefield of paperwork and process, and it's very daunting, and it can often feel like the system it is making life harder for you every step of the way. So having a person walk alongside you, not doing it for you, but being with you when you tackle some of these things, that's very, very important. As I mentioned, safety planning and risk assessment, extremely important, and the court support. So once again, many people have told us that they sit in that courtroom and they feel so alone. They often feel that the person who was using the violence in the first place might have a lot of their friends and their mates, around, but they feel completely alone, like, their in-laws have turned against them, things like that. So our court support, involves not only the preparation of documents and helping you to get the most out of any, pro bono legal time that you've got, but also, helping you to figure out where to go through those family court buildings so that you're less likely to run into that perpetrator, because often there's a lot of intimidation that goes on, and it's so frightening. I'm trembling even just thinking about some of these experiences and things that have happened in these courtrooms. So having someone who's so calm and measured, to let you have all of the responses and fear and everything that happens in that time to just happen and to be with you and help you stay calm, help you to breathe. I think that's really immeasurable. It means we cover a lot of ground. I mean, we go all the way to, up in Joondalup, down to Rockingham. Sometimes we'll spend 5 or 6 hours in a day in the CBD waiting. There's a lot of waiting. And obviously the longer you wait, the more anxious you feel. There's a lot of childcare needed as well for women to be able to go to these appointments. The support is extremely holistic and tailored. But beyond those crisis response services that we offer, there's also a lot in the primary prevention, but especially in the recovery and healing. And this is, I think, something that Orana House does really, really well, and we're becoming quite known for. We don't put a time limit on our aftercare. Our Switch Centre, which stands for Supporting Women in the Community Holistically, bit of a mouthful, let's go Switch. And this is a place where women still come to us for months and even years afterwards, because it's sometimes the one place they still feel really free to drop their mask and, be supported, because it's not over for a very long time, not in the first 3 months, and, sometimes those after effects are still felt. So there's FDV specialist counselling that we offer there. There's financial counselling. There's employment training and workshops. There's also a peer connect group called the Warrior Women, and they just actually lead that themselves and support each other. And the women who are further down that path, really inspire and motivate the ones who are newer into the service to say, hang in there, like, I got you, sis, you're going to be okay. Like, a couple of years from now, you're not going to believe how far you've come and how strong you are. They just spend time having a cuppa and a yarn and, just sometimes sitting in silence with each other, but having somewhere to go, where you can be wholly yourself is really beneficial as well.
It's interesting because we hear this a lot through our community and through the grant recipients that we work with, but that peer-led healing is just amazing. There is a lot of women that will have lived experience in this space. The reality is 1 in 3 do face physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. this is a very scary statistic, but it's real. It's beautiful that so many women will go through that, and then once they themselves can feel that they've healed, that they turn to look for women and to help women and walk alongside women going through that as well. It's quite remarkable, and well done for providing such a wraparound service. And I've been able to be a mentor at Orana House and actually seen the work that you're doing firsthand. So congratulations again on that.
Yeah, we were so lucky to have you. That was absolutely fantastic. That was with the Empowered for Employment program, which is also very, very tailored to an individual experience. And
it is. It's so rewarding. I encourage any of our listeners to get on board with becoming a mentor in that space. It's really great. So let's bring it back to the Housing Families program, and I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about this terminology around it, a post-refuge bottleneck. Can you talk us through what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. And for any of your listeners who perhaps are new members to 100 Women, just for a bit of context, this Housing Families program, initially it was like a research project that we did during COVID times, just to investigate what were some of the barriers that were affecting women who were victim survivors of family and domestic violence in Perth's rental market. And we went really deep on this research, and we did a lot of roundtables, and we spoke to not only victim survivors, of course, but to people in the industry, to property owners as well as managers. And there was this huge stigma. There was a misconception out there that these women who we see all the time, the desire they have to create a stable home for their children, they were being rejected because of this fear that, the property was going to get damaged or something. Obviously, these women have never done any of that kind of thing. And, they're not the ones damaging property. They're the ones who want to plant a garden and, cook dinners with their kids. And they just weren't getting a look in. A lot of the time, these were women who had no real rental history of their own because they'd been under coercive control, financial control, so their names weren't on leases, or there was a person who had damaged property who they had actively chosen to get away from, and still they were bearing the brunt of all of this afterwards. So some of these women were applying for like 100 rentals, even more in some cases, and it was so heartbreaking. And off the back of that research, we said, look, we want to do more. Like, there is actually capacity here. We know with so many women in the property industry, and not just women, men who might also really want to do something to change this narrative. Loads of men too have actually gotten on board with this program because they know no mother should have to choose between keeping her kids safe and being homeless, So we created this program, and, it's evolved a lot since it began, but, since we got this boost from 100 Women, it has really grown in ways that continue to really thrill us, actually, and give us a lot of hope to keep going in such a difficult sector, in such a difficult time in socioeconomically. I mean, it's really difficult in this crisis, but there are enough people coming together right now to prove this is a really functional way forward. It basically just means we need more people to say, hang on, we know these women make outstanding tenants, and we're actually going to back them. We're going to believe in them and give them an opportunity.
And we will talk through the numbers shortly, but it is an incredible roaring success and so innovative, and particularly because you're using partners in making this happen. It just spreads the word much quicker. The property market is all the better for a service like this, I think. So let's have a talk about the program itself. Can you walk us through what a tenancy advocate is and how that working week looks like for them?
So with the Housing Families program, it's built on this simple 3 words: connect, move, succeed. Creating those connections, facilitating the move, and then obviously being there for that follow-through success and sharing that success so that it creates those ripple effects and generates more. But a tenancy advocate, their role begins the minute we receive the referral. And these referrals come from services, not just our own refuge. We partner with refuges all over Perth as well. We've housed women who've come to us from other regions from WA too, if it's no longer safe for them to remain in their original community. It begins with that conversation, as I said, without judgment, listening, understanding this woman's story, determining if she's eligible and rental ready. This is very important, and this is something that's definitely become really refined as the program has gone through multiple stages.
What does rental ready mean?
So rental ready means practical and emotional readiness. Essentially, it means she's got her bond organised, her identification and documents in place, and is no longer in any kind of immediate crisis. So obviously Orana House helps with all of those things, but we won't put someone forward for a rental until we know that that initial legwork is really stable. But the reason we make this distinction between rental ready and not yet is because for those other women, these are the ones who we need to prioritise for our transitional housing, and just to restore that housing continuum, we need to keep these beds for those in immediate crisis. And so any time that we can help someone who is really ready for that next step to move out from refuge and from transitional homes and then into their own independent rental, this is a massive success story.
A lot of us take it for granted, just to have a roof over your head and a safe place to call home. This is a human basic need. It's a basic human right.
And I'm sure lots of your listeners are familiar with the Housing First policy, which is globally recognised. It's until you know that you've got a safe place to sleep, you're not really able to do all of those other things that still also need to happen in life, pursuing, higher education, employment, stability for your kids' education, all of those things. Actually, we see that happening once we've got women into our housing families rentals, and it's just so thrilling. So we stay connected. So the housing advocate really builds a relationship with these women for a very long time, actually, whether it's for the duration of that first lease, 6 months, or the full 12. There's regular check-ins, there's a cuppa, there's a visit, there's a, hey, your place is looking so beautiful. There's a partnership where we help them to source some really nice furnishings and essential items to really kit out.
Which is other charities doing that service as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we're all about the teamwork. We can't do all of this alone. That would, no one can do this alone. So we try really hard to make sure that we're connected with other service providers. We're not trying to do it all alone. It's always stronger when we've got that backing, whether it's from, groups like yours or with individual real estate agencies or with property owners and investors. It takes the village, as we say. It really does.
So you received 204 referrals from 63 different suburbs during the program period. What does that tell you about the scale of this problem in Perth?
It tells us what we've known for a very long time. COVID turned up the heat even further, but this was already happening before. The ongoing housing crisis is definitely making things worse, taking away a lot of their options. But I hope that talking to you on a platform like this actually helps people who've never been in this situation to understand what these women are up against, so that, if you are ever in a position where you've been trusted with someone's story, when they tell you that they're going through something really, really tough, and for the life of you can't think why she doesn't just leave, I hope it gives people a lot more compassion. And I hope it helps people to realise as well in their life, if they're ever in a position fortunate enough to have an investment property, there's actually something extremely tangible that you could do that would make a huge difference. And you'd still be getting rent for your property. It wouldn't take much away from you, but it's just making that conscious choice to say, who am I going to rent this to? A lot of people want this. Who am I going to give this opportunity to? And what would that mean for the next generation of kids who are growing up? How would that help us to break these intergenerational cycles of violence?
Actually, Jasmyn, what you just mentioned there, it brings me back to a letter that you submitted with your acquittal, which was the conclusion of your grant funding with 100 women. And I'd like to share it with the listeners, if that's okay, because it's from one of the property owners that were a part of the Housing Families program. They mentioned that they inherited their parents' home in North Perth, and they decided they wanted to be part of the solution to the cost of living and housing crisis and not part of the problem, which is just brilliant. The Housing Families program run by Orana is a simple and effective vehicle for owners of private properties like ourselves to engage in the solution by providing affordable housing to women and their children escaping domestic violence. Whilst short-term crisis support remains urgent and essential, the medium to long-term nature of Orana's Housing Families program is a pathway to reducing the need for such services. So becoming a cost benefit to governments and not a cost burden. This is such a true statement, isn't it? And how are you finding having people like these wonderful property owners that have jumped in and on to support this incredible program?
Oh, that was such a beautiful day when I met those two. They're brother and sister. And what they say about the cost benefit versus the cost burden is absolutely so true. And we're actually doing a lot of modelling at the moment on that ROI, that return on investment for our business case with government going forward, because it's a no-brainer. But back to this brother and sister, I met them and they're just the most gorgeous, wonderful people. They're very successful in their own right. And I think that, they grew up in a family that, has always cared about community. Their mother had only recently passed and they were so proud to show me a lot of the artworks and things that she'd made, reflecting, she was a member of the early suffragette movements, and they were just real early activists. They come from this really beautiful, strong grassroots tradition, and I think that they felt that this was the most beautiful way that they could honour their mum's memory, is by making sure that this lovely family home went to a new family who really needed it more than they did, that they ensure that it goes to someone who really needed it. And they actually went to a lot of effort to make it disability accessible too, and I thought that was, incredibly important.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time we don't address the issue around domestic violence for people that do have a disability. So
yeah, that's certainly another intersection of disadvantage for sure.
Oh, that's fabulous. So the grant itself, it funded 15 hours of the advocate's time. Can you talk us through what actually they did during those working hours?
They did so much. I dare say they did a lot more than 15 hours.
I could imagine.
When that's all of us in this sector, when we've got the passion, I think that, we really go above and beyond for every single person that we serve. But this advocate did a tremendous job, and it is a position that we absolutely believe in making permanent, because it has had a massive impact. So based out of our switch centre, this is where, the women are linking in with all of the other complementary services that really help them to have their best chance of success in the long term. But, she spends a lot of time going to home opens. She spends a lot of time liaising directly with the property managers and the real estate agencies that we call impact agents, really smoothing out any tenancy issues before they arise. She does a lot of tenancy training for the clients. She also does FDV training for the agencies, so that, because property managers are in this very unique position when they do rent inspections to pick up on, red flags potentially. Creating an industry of FDV aware property managers,
very smart,
so important. This is primary prevention at work. One property manager has a really positive experience, they tell their colleagues, the ripples continue. So very much that tenancy advocate. Spends a lot of time building rental resumes with women as well, helping them to put their best foot forward, to write cover letters. Some of our women in this program don't have English as their first language, so that's obviously difficult again for them. And really going with them and walking through, helping to kit out the homes, working with our partners to source essential items to really make a house a home, and then just doing those check-ins afterwards, just making sure that everything is okay, there's no arrears in the rent. And honestly, this hasn't been an issue. We're working really, really well together, and we know that it's not always smooth, it's not always easy.
Well, it's a pilot program, wasn't it, really?
But our success rate has been phenomenal and continues to be. So
we'll go through those amazing numbers shortly, but can you kind of bring it back to a story? Let's hear a story that captures what this program actually does for a woman and her children.
Yeah, hard to pick one. And honestly, there are some overlaps in the stories. Some of the commonalities are, kids are going to school more happily. They feel less stigmatised. They feel less anxious in the morning. A really big one was, little kids, because a lot of these kids are pretty young, sleeping through the night. And the mum's telling me that they're sleeping through the night.
Which is critical.
Yeah. But on an individual level, a woman that I met only a few weeks ago who had been working really closely with our tenancy advocate for so long. She still was a bit numb. She couldn't quite believe it had finally happened for her. And she was a bit scared, to be fair. She suddenly she knew she had something that so many people want. And she almost felt undeserving. That shame that I mentioned earlier, whole holding her in that place of like, am I going to be okay? Can I really do this? This is a huge moment for her. But, just having that home, sleeping better at night, all of those things, has given her a bit more headspace back to go and work on those subsequent goals. I just think that's so wonderful. And now she's got a driver's license. That gave her this huge surge because she's always been told like, oh, you didn't get it now, you're never going to get it, That was what her ex had always been saying to her, talking her down and making her doubt herself always. And suddenly, she's got this home. It's looking really beautiful. Our tenancy advocate actually went and had a cuppa with her and she prepared this beautiful meal and they just shared some food together and talked. And, the fact that she could host someone in her home, can you imagine like how special that feels after you've been in refuge and transitional homes and everything for so long?
And one of the stories you shared with me was about a woman, and I think we mentioned it earlier, that was knocked back 100 times.
Yeah, oh yeah.
What that must do to women. So to now have a place of their own, what do you think that must feel for them when they get that call?
Honestly, quite shocking. So the 100 plus rejections has happened a few times, and that's often been with women who hadn't yet been referred to us. They were trying to do everything alone and they didn't know that we could help with this. This woman had been carrying so much responsibility and trying to do things that, she was very capable. But just having that person to give that objective eye over her applications and say, here's a bit of tweaking that'll make it even stronger. Here's all the stuff that you've been doing that shows how incredibly responsible and ready you are that maybe you haven't seen yourself. Just here's a really strong foot to put forward. And then it has to be said, we've got that connection with a really sympathetic agency or someone who gets it. Just, being able to link them to the right people obviously helps a lot too.
And are these property agents dotted right across Perth? So you're making sure, I guess, that there's access for these women to perhaps be in the areas that they need to be?
Yeah, there are a couple of pockets where there's been a bit more, and it might be because of proximity to where we operate or where we've got more established relationships. But we're starting to see agencies from some of the outer suburbs also, saying, hey, we want to get involved with this. This is fantastic. We see homelessness on our doorstep all the time, and homelessness is actually very much an FDV related issue. There's a huge overlap. So it's been great because oftentimes the women that we're supporting really want a fresh start. They're very happy to move somewhere a little further away. Everyone's journey is different. And so, agencies, wherever they're located, if they want to get on board with this, they should definitely get in touch with us because, we're only putting forward absolutely incredible people that we vouch for. But what better outcome for everyone? Everyone wants a great tenant. Everyone wants to feel good about what they're doing with their investments. And look, everyone wants to live a safe, free, happy life and in a community where our kids are safe. Like, that's good for all of us.
I was having a discussion with Alicia just before. It's also dignity, which is what I think this program and all of the programs that you run at Orana House gives to women is that ability to feel really confident, capable, resilient, to move through into a really positive future for her and for her children. So congratulations again. Let's now share kind of what those numbers were. 100 Women Grant funded this program for 2 years, and you've just acquitted early this year. And when you think about what that 50,000 made possible, 64 women were housed with 109 children. How do you think about that investment?
It was thrilling for us. At the time, it was the biggest grant we'd ever received. I think I told you I did a cartwheel when I got that phone call coming through from 100 women that day. It was a massive, massive deal for us. We were a very small organisation, even though we've been around for 35 plus years. Not many people had heard of us, and that was a conscious decision for safety and security and everything. We've kept a very low profile. We've been very much under the radar. But we definitely reached a point during COVID where we said, look, we need to make a concerted effort to put ourselves out there safely and still respecting the privacy of our staff who work on the front lines and the women that we serve and their children. But if people don't know about us, they don't know how easy it is to help. And those 64 women, what could have happened to them? I mean, we all know the statistics of how many women are killed in Australia every single year. It's It's revolting. I don't think I'll ever be desensitised to it.
And nor should we be.
And nor should we be. So when I think about those women and when I think about those children who now have an opportunity to see what a functioning, happy, healthy life looks like, they don't have to grow up seeing something and thinking it's normal. They can see that they deserve better and that there will be people who will support them if they ever need to. We need to be thinking long term, we need to break these cycles into the future and we need to never stop. We need to never say it's too big, it's too hard, it's too much. We just need to say we need more people to help us. So, collective giving like 100 Women, I think is really key to this. None of us can carry this alone, but together we can do so much.
Oh, that's the moral of the story right there. So now that the grant with the 100 Women has been acquitted, but of course the program is still continuing today, I understand that you commissioned a report through university and I'd love to hear some of the outcomes from that.
Yeah, I'd love to share them. It was unequivocal in its praise. It was an independent evaluation. It was a social impact measurement essentially, and through the Curtin School of Allied Health. And Professor Donna Chung is really highly regarded in the FDB space, not just here in Australia, but actually internationally. She's absolutely brilliant. So with her team of researchers, they really drill down into the nuts and bolts of both our Housing Families program and the Switch Centre, so two separate evaluation reports. She put together this document that we are very proud to share far and wide, and certainly it's something that we have been delivering to government. The findings are tremendous, and something else that this 100 Women grant really made possible during those 2 years, it gave us time to deliver more. So we've got more case studies, we've got more stats, we've got a lot more to show that return on investment as well for the financial modelling, which is our next step this year, is that financial modelling aspect. I think it's the last piece in the puzzle, but we've been incredibly reassured by government that this is a program that is successful, that should be scaled and maybe even replicated.
I know that we'd love to hear that happen for all of the cities around Australia and in the regions as well. What a remarkable opportunity for growth.
Yeah, very much so. So look, those are our next steps for this year, is making sure that this program doesn't disappear, because it's needed more than ever. That's absolutely for sure. And it's working. I mean, in the last couple of weeks, we just housed 5 more women. We've had a number of our impact agents from the early stages coming back on board. We've had the minister talking publicly at a big conference full of real estate agency across WA about the value of this program. So we've got endorsement now, and I think that's actually a big credit to 100 Women, because it got our name out there, and it also just showed we're doing our due diligence with the budget, with the acquittal, all of those things. For anyone who's never applied for a grant with 100 Women, it's a really important process. It was quite new to me at the time, and I learned a lot through it. I think it's very reassuring just how well thought through that process is, and what you need to demonstrate just to make sure your project really does have the legs to go further once the grant is over. It adds a lot of weight and legitimacy to anyone who you choose to fund, really. So it did a lot for our reputation, and it had some really wonderful after effects. And yeah, I mean, we're still incredibly grateful. So love every chance we get to chat with you and all of your supporters.
Oh, well, and we equally are just amazed by the outcomes. In fact, I think the original form that you'd submitted had less women that you were aiming to house, and you've blown that out the water. You have quite a few more families that you've been able to accommodate. So,
yeah, we were pretty humble in the beginning. We just wanted to do a small number as well as we could, and once we learned through doing, we realised we could do a lot more, as long as more people came along for the ride with us. That was the main thing, really.
Jasmyn, thank you so much for your time today. I did just want to ask one more thing on behalf of our listeners that are wanting to, perhaps they do have a property that they may be interested to chat with you about, but what else could our listeners do to support Orana Refuge?
Well, certainly sharing our work with your network is massive, that word of mouth. And whether that's as a supporter or, showing to all of the women around you that you care about this topic and that you might be a safe person for them to reach out to and talk to, that's immensely valuable. Sometimes, people are caught off guard and they go, oh gosh, someone's shared something with me, I don't know where to go next. So I guess if you become familiar with our work and you know how to reach out and get in touch with us, we'll always do whatever we can to give some really tailored advice on a practical and financial level. If you don't have an investment property, not many of us do, I sure don't, you might actually know people who do. You might have friends who are in the property sector as property managers or real estate agents. We would love to connect with them and talk to them about our program. You might also just simply want to contribute towards rent top-ups. So we have a special fund where every single cent of that donation, which is tax deductible, goes towards either rent top-ups of $50 a week for 1 year or bond assistance. Yeah, which is great. And to be honest, we've had zero issues with bond. It's been really wonderful, but we know that because we're putting forward fantastic tenants. But just having that bond up front is really prohibitive for people who are on a very tight budget as a single parent. So visiting Orana, orana.net.au, I guess you can put a caption. Come to our website, follow us on LinkedIn, share any of the stories we're putting on there. I think that's really great because we just need to land on the radar of the people who have that capacity as well.
Well, congratulations, Jasmyn, on a brilliant program that was so strongly supported by our membership in 2023, and we can't wait to share the outcomes of the program with our membership and our wider network, and of course the outcomes of sharing your point of view today with us. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
That is what a grant does, not in theory but in practice. A funded tenancy advocate, 15 hours a week or more, as Jasmyn said, walking beside women the rental market has rejected over and over. 64 women and 109 children with their own front door. Our membership community helped to make this happen. 100 Women is a giving circle. Every member contributes a minimum of $300 a year, which is the same as a coffee a week. With 400 members contributing together, that becomes around $200,000 or more granted directly to organisations just like Orana House. Organisations doing work that is practical, specific and life-changing. Every member gets a vote on where their money goes. And you've just heard what one of those votes made possible. If you'd like to be a part of our giving circle, we'd love to have you join us. You can find out more and join at 100women.org.au. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for listening to Community Kind. Thank you, Jasmyn, and we'll see you next month.